Thank you everybody for joining today. And we are going to have a session on combating ransomware and building a strategy to prevent and detect attacks. So we're very glad that you could join us today and take some time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. My name is Bob Erdman. I am the Cybersecurity Development Director here at Core Security. So in that role, I work on all of our offensive and defensive security solutions. I've been here with Help Systems about 5 years, and prior to that, I spent about 25 years working on critical communication systems for healthcare, defense department, other governmental type agencies. So today I work a lot with our antivirus, anti-ransomware solutions, our offensive pen testing solutions, and our advanced threat hunting and network traffic analysis. So I'm really happy to be here today. And joining me is going to be Sandi Moore. Sandi, you want to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Sandi Moore here. I'm a principal security consultant here with Help Systems, and I've been working with cybersecurity in relation to IBMI mid-range servers for about 18 years now, and work with antivirus, uh, network security, all sorts of different security functions, and really enjoy being able to share with people the solutions we have and talk about the threats that they are dealing with, as well as strategies for mitigating and remediating any issues.
Thank you, Sandi. So here at Help Systems, we did a malware survey in conjunction with Cybersecurity Insiders. So we surveyed professionals all over the world, and we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the statistics and the things that we learned as we stepped into this webinar here. And first off, almost 90% view malware as an extreme or moderate threat. I'm surprised actually it's that low. Just chatting with Sandi before this, I think, what we say, between the two of us, we have 4 people that we've spoken to this week that are combating ransomware when they called us in their environments.
Yep.
75% believing ransomware and malware is going to be a larger threat to their organizations over the next year. I think that's definitely true. We're seeing a huge increase in the amount of ransomware attacks. They're in the news a lot more lately. Those are just the ones that you're hearing about. Most of them, generally today, you don't. And we're really seeing people starting to understand how big of a problem that these things really are. Nobody is immune anymore. It's much more 2 types of people: those that have been attacked and know it, and those that have been attacked and don't. And what we're really trying to make sure that we get to is everybody at least knowing it. I mean, if you can't see that those people are in your network, you can't see that malware is being dropped on your systems until it's actually detonated and starting to lock your systems out. We've got a big problem that we need to address. So being able to get the visibility across all your systems, and that's a lot of times where we see things happening as well. It's not just a Windows problem anymore. And more than half believe it's likely or extremely likely that they're going to be a target in the next year. And I think that's definitely true. The actors, at least sort of softly, didn't go after healthcare during COVID when it was really in its high days. They didn't go after some of the critical infrastructures. I don't know that it was really benevolent on their side. It's probably much more, if we touch these things, law enforcement's really going to come down on us. If I go poke company X, probably be pretty quiet and I'm just going to get paid. And that seems like it's changing a lot. I think some of that has to do with a lot of the ransomware as a service things that are out there, where now I don't really have to know what I'm doing all that well. I just need to know the guys that know what they're doing. I can go in and purchase a kit. I can go out and deploy it. I can just give them a cut of what I make. And I think as that model has gotten larger, the people aren't caring so much anymore about where they go with it. And I don't know, Sandi, do you have any comments around any of that?
Yeah, it's highly incentivized, and with people paying ransom, they see it in the news when the big payments are paid out, and they know it's happening. So it is just a bigger game that is not going to go anywhere. And I really think that the ones that believe that that this is a larger threat, they're spot on. And it really, and what I say time and time again to people is that it's not if you're going to get attacked, it's when. And knowing when you're attacked is critical to keeping that under wraps and not actually letting it become um, a big nuclear problem in the entire network.
I think that's definitely true. And you see as new CVEs and vulnerabilities get announced, that people are immediately probing for them all across the network. It's trivial now for them to look for a doorway in. And if they find that doorway in, we have to be able to detect that they did that and be able to pick them off. And we do have a few different types of ransomware things that are out there, and different types of malware. The one that we probably see the most is that straight old encrypting and cryptoware, making you not able to access your files. If they did their job the way they try to, make you not able to access your backups or anything else. And that's where we see a lot of these malware artifacts that are in the systems for a long period of time. Because if I just jump in light off the ransomware, I'm not maximizing my effect or my dollars, and that's really what they want to do. The first thing in a ransomware attack, if we're just talking about that, mostly is a data theft. They're getting in and compromising data and trying to grab everything they can make money on. And really the ransomware is coming out the backside. And then the third piece is, well, I'm going to leak your data if you don't pay me, or you got to pay me more so I won't leak your data to try and get that extra dollars off the top. So we're continually seeing that. Things that are encrypting and just trying to take off computers, they can't be booted. Another common way, starting to get infections now through mobile devices and drive-by downloads. So I don't even necessarily need to have you click on anything specific. I just need to get you to go to the right page, and I can in the background be downloading something malicious as you cross through that. That leakware and extortionware, more and more often now we're seeing that combining, where that's just kind of the back effect. That's an incentive to help get people to pay, is to say, I'm also going to leak your data. Though we do sometimes see more targeted attacks where maybe saying you got to pay me $100, or I'm going to leak this compromising picture that I stole from you off your phone. Whether or not they actually did, they're going to try and push that against you to get you to just quickly write a check. And some of the older stuff we don't see it as much, I don't think, anymore, is just kind of trying to do the lock screens to restrict access to the files. There's so many ways to get around those now. I don't think it's as common anymore, as it's so easy now to just lock the files up. There's kits all over the place to do that and just try and take you out. And are you seeing anything different, Sandy, with the customers you're working with, or is we kind of hitting most of them there?
Yeah, no, this is spot on. And actually, when you were talking about mobile device, I was thinking about, I keep getting these random text messages from numbers I don't recognize or know, and there's always a link in the text message, and I always delete them. I would never click on the link. But my 78-year-old dad, he called me and he says, "Hey, I got this text message. Should I open it?" And I'm like, "No." But those are the people that are going to really, not thinking about what it is, that are going to be the exposures, because their devices, if they're connected to the network at work, their device is inside now, and those are the things that do start. That's where it starts.
Yeah, BYOD has made that much easier for people to leverage, because now, rather than corporate issuing us all a certain type of phone, corporate is saying just bring whatever phone you want and plug it in on the guest Wi-Fi, or sometimes the corporate Wi-Fi, because of things you need to do your job. And that definitely opens up some other streams for people to get into those systems. And 80% of the people that we surveyed, slightly over that actually, have had a attack that they know of. So we're definitely seeing this being on the rise. And like we said, we've talked with 4 just this week that called us after the fact. So we know this is happening a lot out there in the world. There's lots of different ways that these actors can get that initial entry. That's always the piece. If we're going to get malware onto somebody's systems, first we have to get to those systems somehow. And there's lots of different ways that happens. Probably the most common is phishing attacks. Spear phishing listed on there is the more targeted version of that, where we're maybe trying to go after our CFO to make a payment. That's definitely something we've seen on the rise. Business email compromise, or BEC, as you'll see it listed sometimes. A very popular scam recently is trying to get somebody's paycheck directed to a different account, so that we can quickly make a hit, get a bunch of money, and get out the door. Not necessarily dropping so much malware on the systems, is just making money off of it. I know of a recent instance where that's happened, where somebody was used to communicating with their employees over personal emails as well as business emails. It's smaller companies growing really fast, bringing on a lot of employees, but it's smaller HR departments, smaller finance department, and when employees wanted to speak a little more privately with them, they would go off email and they'd use like a Gmail account. What about my benefit X, or I got something going on in my my marriage or whatever. And those executives were used to communicating that way. So suddenly when hey, I want to change the payment account for my paycheck pops up, they're used to saying, sure, this is how you do it. And they luckily caught it. They caught it at the end of the steps and not at the beginning, but at least they caught it. Now they're changing their procedures to, you can't be doing this unless you're on a corporate domain, just for those reasons. Because if somebody fakes my name at hotmail.com and sends it in and says, hey, I want to roll something, we really hope that our people don't actually make that happen. Where they're getting those accesses in with the phishing attacks, it's a lot about getting credentials or getting some kind of malicious drop brought down to those systems. So I get a malicious email, it's got a URL that looks like it's legitimate. I pop it open and it's like, hey, change your corporate password or change your banking password. I want to capture those credentials and then try and play them back into the network to get access to the systems. We'll see the same thing with web server exploits. If somebody can get into our web front ends, many times those are tied to our database backends, tied into our corporate infrastructure. Either getting something malicious by breaking through the web with a cross-site scripting, SQL injection types of things, or redirecting people to, again, give us information that then we can use as a hack team to try and target our way into the environment. We'll see a little bit of that with domain software as well. You may hear about domain doppelgangers or somebody registering domains that look much like yours. So helpsystems.com being a domain that we use, maybe one of the S's we hide in the middle of that as a 5, or we take the L and we make it a 1 and we try and register those domains. Again, a user working quickly may not notice that. When they drop on and it looks just like the standard website they expect to see, then we can try and harvest their data from them or get some kind of malicious software downloaded, get that initial access into the systems, and gives us a way to start that attack where we can bring in that malware. And there's tons of different ransomware strains out there. A lot of these are probably pretty familiar to people. WannaCry was the huge one a few years ago. CryptoLockers, Petya Not Petya came out. So these aren't really going away. We're starting to see even government now take a much bigger focus on understanding how bad of a problem this is and how critical it is for us to protect our systems and protect all of our systems. And when we surveyed people around the impacts of malware, like how is this affecting you and your company, the number one thing that we saw was an increase in the spend that IT has to do, followed closely by productivity loss. And when we're thinking about that spend, some of it's going to be on additional tools. So, busting up our defenses, maybe getting some pen test services brought in, but there's also all of the side spending that you have to do with one of these infections. I mean, you're going to have to clean up. You're going to have to fix your backups. You're going to have to take a lot of time to rebuild systems. Your cyber insurance might increase. You're going to have to spend overtime to get those guys in and hire an outside consulting group to come in and try and do root cause analysis, possibly, depending on your organization, if you have that staff or not. It can really get to be a very expensive proposition. And Sandy, you're probably seeing changes around that too with the people you work with, even when people have called us post-breach.
Absolutely. Yeah.
On the operations side too, downtime, of course, is number one. Taking systems offline, suddenly people can't do their job. Or
No,
if
you
you're
don't
more
sell
of
anything either. Your business is not making money when your servers are down. And that's,
no.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think of your e-commerce, take down your catalog site for how many thousands of dollars a minute that it might be costing that business to be down, or take down point of sale activities that are probably being driven, if not completely, from a large back end. At least the data that it's accessing is most likely in a large backend. So it's not just the outside edges anymore. People are either accessing critical apps from these big systems, or they're sharing portions of those big systems to other users, either through like file shares, communication drops, or people exchanging files, or just reaching back into large data sets to pull data into the applications that they're using. And I think at this point, I'd like to launch a quick poll, and I will do my best to do it properly here. And we'd like to survey you out there in the audience. How significant of a threat are you seeing ransomware and malware being within your organization? So I'm going to open up this poll here for a minute and let you kind of choose, and we'll see how our audience's scores kind of match up with what our global survey came out with.
Yeah, this will be interesting to see. If you're here, you must be concerned about it. You know, an interesting story, Bob, while everybody's replying to the poll here, I was at a home goods store, and I wanted to get some carpet samples. And the salesman told me that he couldn't currently order me carpet samples because the vendor had been attacked by ransomware and their entire phone system was down. So don't even think about that. Your phone system is most likely a voice over IP system. That's down, so no one can actually make a call. Website was down, so they weren't giving any samples out to sell carpet. So, you know, the things that the impact is crazy, where, you know, you really start thinking about, if things are not available, what is going to happen? So anyways.
No, I think that's very true. And we're seeing that in the responses as well. Slightly over 50% of the responses were an extreme threat to their business. And the only other answer was moderate, which was the remainder of the people that answered the poll. So I think that's very true as well. So I'm going to close that poll off here so we can keep going down our list and talk a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes and how some of these things are getting into our environments and what they're doing when they're there. And you know, we know it all basically starts with somebody has to write this code. So somebody's writing bad installer code. And a lot of times what we see are these are not single individuals anymore. They are dedicated teams that specialize in certain aspects of what's going on. And it is very much run like a business. And a lot of times these guys, when they write that code, they'll work with people that are specializing on the install part. So they're the ones, they're getting holes into these systems. There's people selling access even. If I want to get an access to somebody's corporate systems, there's websites you can go to where I can say, sell me access to a Windows machine, guaranteed to work when I purchase it. It may not be guaranteed to stay up for a long time, but it's open at the time that I get it. I can get in there and get these access points. And then I'm going to look to get software down into these environments. And that's where we want to start looking at, you know, this is where we pick it up. We can see that somebody dropped malware into your system. This is where a lot of people, I think, are under the assumption that it's always going to their Windows PCs. Somebody's always dumping stuff on Windows. And this is where we really see that spreading out now. And it's not just that way anymore. When we get that initial access and people come in, those dropper scripts that are built to bring in that additional malware now. So I'm getting something down that's actually looking at the environment and understanding what's there. Am I sitting on an AIX or a Unix box? Am I sitting on a Linux machine? We know that generally a lot of the big backend systems these days are running a more backend type operating system. It's not just Windows Server. People are running tons of critical infrastructure on Linux. They're running tons of critical infrastructure still on Unix and Unix variants like AIX, like Solaris, mid-range systems like IBM even mainframe. You know, everybody thinks mainframe is this big green screen monolith from the 70s. A lot of times these days, mainframe is 10,000 Linux VMs running on a mainframe architecture. And they go out and they get these systems and they unpack them and they get them dropped, and then they get started selling that access back into those ransomware gangs. And this is where people are really looking to spread that infection around, start to move things around the environments. Maybe the ransomware or malware that gets dropped is not for the operating system they drop it on. it's quite possible they're going to drop a Windows-based variant on a back-end Unix box or a back-end Linux box. It doesn't matter if it executes. It just has to be there for the next time one of those Windows machines shares into that folder, and now I can spread to that Windows box and actually execute. If they drop it on Windows a lot of times, maybe it's executing from there and it's encrypting back across a share file. We see that happen frequently as we're all interconnecting machines now. If we're looking at IBMI, we're sharing files through the IFS, Integrated File System, looking like another drive letter to a Windows box. SMB and Samba shares, if we're talking Linux and Unix, it's nothing different to Windows. Windows sees it as S: and a bunch of files that I can talk to, and so does the malware. If it's talking to Windows, it's talking to the malware running on Windows. So we see these things being interconnected a lot these days. And as those threat actors keep working and exfiltrating data, that's where they really start to spread, and then it kind of light the network on fire as they're getting out the door. So we really want to make sure that we can get that defensive perimeter up and catch these infections as soon as they happen, and make sure that we can find them when they're sitting inside of our network, no matter where they live. So that we can prevent that from affecting our business and really shorten that dwell time inside the network. And that's where we see these people being inside networks for many, many days most of the time, sometimes many, many months. Over the last few years, that dwell time has definitely gone down. But if you think of somebody maliciously poking around your network, even for a certain number of hours, what they might be able to do to damage the business can be quite substantial. And we see a lot of those persistent attacks leading to that ransomware infection. When those victims get that initial infection, it's going to go out and it's going to spread. It's going to expand across the network. They're looking to spread and have something that can drive to all of the systems, and then they can start to exfiltrate data. So if we can't catch these malicious files that are inside of our systems, like we said earlier, most of the time, these are data compromises first, because the money's in the data in a lot of these places, be it PHI, confidential engineering diagrams, financial records, customer lists, you name it. What can we monetize out of the data set? And we're going to keep, we see these things keep expanding across the networks and more data getting pulled out. And then we get into that suddenly they're done, we can't find any more good data, and that's when we can kind of light the network on fire and turn on the ransomware and start to encrypt everything to try and get that next step in the money chain. So we want to expand the ransomware, we want to encrypt everything we can encrypt, and now we want to get the maximum amount of dollars out of somebody to pay to get the decryption key, is what, of course, everybody hopes. And a lot of times we'll see, this is where the big IT spend is. We all got to go and do our cleanup. Either we're pulling in from backups, we're reloading systems, possibly paying a ransom to get some keys to make this faster for us because we don't have a good way to do it ourselves. And many times what we'll see is people have come back a month, 2 months later with the same problem again. And it's because they can't clean up everywhere. So it's not just that it's living on this one server, it might be also sitting and hiding on an IoT device or sitting and hiding on a printer. And if we haven't caught everything in the environment, there's still a backdoor. If you heard about the big SolarWinds Orion type issue, the one that compromised all the government sites and a lot of companies, something like 18,000 that they identified that had that software possibly on it. They don't know if everybody got attacked equally, probably not, but the potential is there. They're not even now completely sure that people aren't still there in some of these places. So the doorway was open. Somebody might have gone through. I think I found them. But did I find everywhere they went? Did I kick them out completely, or is somebody still lurking in some of these places waiting to launch the next thing and start the whole process over again and reinfect everybody again? So we really want to make sure that our defenses are up to snuff, that we have good backups, that we're prepared to be able to use them. A lot of times we'll see people have great backups, maybe a great DR plan, but the plan's never been tested or executed, and they're not going to be as proficient on it. At least doing some type of tabletop exercises where you are walking through what to do so that you understand what to do. And maybe if you're thinking that paying the ransom might be a possibility that you have to exercise, are you prepared? Does somebody have an account with access to crypto, which is generally the way they want you to pay. Are you going to have to go out and figure out how to get Bitcoin first? Certainly not advocating that ransom paying is the way to go. The more we pay, the more this happens. And law enforcement always says, don't pay, call us. But whatever the case might be, your business, your IT professionals, your executives, need to be thinking about this and being prepared, for the worst, and hopefully never having to exercise that plan. Any comments that I might have missed there, Sandy? Anything else you'd like to drop in on that?
No, that just scares me. This is it really, the persistence and everything that has to be considered with it is just, to be able to think like the attacker and to be able to stop those attacks. You really have to think like the criminal in order to think how are they going to get in. So, and it's very hard to step back from that sometimes.
I think that's a really great point. As you're going through these exercises with your teams, you need to think like the attacker. What are your crown jewels? What is an attacker going after? What are the paths they can use to get there? And then start to, put in those defensive rings, defensive depth around that as you expand into that environment. How is somebody going to get from my DMZ web application that's open to the world to my backend protected data, and what paths might they take to get there? And we did ask people about their confidence levels in their organization's defenses. So how do they see their posture today? Do they think they can really do a good job of blocking ransomware, blocking malware before it spreads? And we did some, extremely or very confident, about a little over a third, and another good chunk, pretty moderately confident. So I always think back to that recent commercials that's going on today. I'm moderately confident I can jump this car over this river. Is that an acceptable option or not? But it's good. Some people aren't confident at all or only slightly. That's about a fifth. So definitely we want people to believe in the protections that they have, to feel that they've got enough protection for the things they're trying to go after. And how confident are people that they can actually remediate and get their systems back if they do have an infection. The very extremely confident was, almost 50%. So that's good. So people are building backup plans, they're building DR. That makes me feel like people are thinking about what they might have to do if this happens to them.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandy, I think I'd like to kick this over to you for a little bit and talk about some of the prevention and detection strategies around this.
Okay. Nah, definitely. Really, talking about effective prevention and detection, there's multiple components to it. There's no silver bullet. There's never one thing that is going to prevent attacks and help you detect attacks. You have to have multiple layers. Action plan. So what are you going to do if something happens? Do you know who is responsible for each function in reaction to an attack, if there is something detected or if the network is impacted? Employee education plays a big component in this as well. Teaching, as Bob was talking about, the phishing attacks, those emails, teaching your users what to not click on, what to look for, what looks suspicious, and really making sure that they understand why they need to care about this, that it's not just us being alarmist. We're really concerned that this is going to happen, and driving home that if the system's down, you're not going to be able to do your job. You may not have a job because we may not be able to recover, and it does happen. So that employee education, but that's not all of it, because the employee education works well until we're distracted. We get an email, we're on the phone, and then we look back at the email not thinking, and we open it and we don't read through it because we're also on the phone, and we click on the link. So we are human, so we do make mistakes. So really all of the extra layers are where it's going to help when that human layer is the failure point. Limiting access to what the users can get to. There is no reason for your users to have access to everything, all of your corporate data. There's not a good reason for that. So making sure that users only have access to what they absolutely need to. and using multiple layers of defenses to restrict access, authorities to specific objects, making sure that sensitive data is encrypted and that encrypted data, only authorized users can see that, decrypt that data and see it in the clear. So again, protecting the data, giving them access, but still limiting the potential exposure there. Somebody has a compromised credentials and ransomware attack is happening and they're trying to exfiltrate that data, they're going to have access to whatever that user has access to, right? I mean, Bob, hackers don't get their own credentials. They take advantage of ours, right?
Oh, definitely. Compromising Active Directory is not all that hard in a lot of places once you get
Yeah,
that initial foothold into the environment. Or if I can just get you to give me credentials, just get you on a phishing site and you tell me
right.
what the credentials are, and then I can just go use them.
There you go. And if the user has a lot of access, so does the compromised credentials are going to provide them that. Applying security updates. So, that was another comment that Bob had made about those updates. You have to make sure that you're on top of applying those security updates, because as soon as a vulnerability is released, they're going to take advantage of it. So you need to make sure that you're updating before the attackers take advantage of that. And a malware protection. Really important layer there as well, making sure that you are actually scanning your servers for malware, making sure that each layer in your network is being scanned, not one place, every place. Because as Bob said, there's going to be attacks where they're going to plant things in multiple places in your environment, anything they can get to. So you have to be making sure you're looking everywhere. And then, of course, being able to find that the compromised device. So how are you going to be able to detect that your devices have been compromised? Making sure that you're monitoring that network so that you can see when things are happening, looking for activity, suspicious, anything suspicious that's going on, being able to identify that quickly to make sure that you're minimizing how far they get. So really all of these together, we're going to give you those layers to really try to prevent things from getting out of control. Something's going to get through. It's just a matter of how far it's going to get. So keeping that under wraps and not letting it get very far, minimizing the damage, minimizing the exposures.
I think that security patching and doing your updates is huge.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, I feel like, believe that everything's a 0-day that's compromising people's networks, because that's what goes in the news and that's what you see on the nightly news shows. One of my teams actually builds a vulnerability scanner. That's one of the other side things that we do here at Help
Mm-hmm.
Systems, and we've talked with a lot of companies. We do a lot of research around that, and it's a very low single-digit percentage of breaches that are related to 0 days. The vast majority of the things we see happening are known defects, known vulnerabilities that already have patches available, and they were not applied, or configurations that can be adjusted that were not configured.
Yeah.
By far, that's the vast majority of the ways we see people getting their doorway entry to these businesses, is through things that could have been closed.
Yeah. I talked with somebody a couple weeks ago, actually. They had a user that had some drives mapped to the root of their server, and they unfortunately ended up with an auto run worm that ran on from the PC and changed all of the items in their directory to hidden and dropped copies of itself. It had actually been identified and addressed 3 years ago, but it still was able to execute on that PC and attack their network drives. So,
Mhm.
updating. If it's not update, every device has to be updated.
And that also kind of folds in that limiting user permissions, role-based
Yeah.
access control, least
Yeah.
privilege. And we see that a lot on the mid-range platforms like the IBMI,
Yes. One of
because we
our
do big security surveys there too.
Yep, one of our biggest vulnerabilities is access. So, but when we go back to the report that the anti-malware, antivirus, and endpoint security solutions, our 78% of those found that it was the most effective for preventing and blocking that malware and ransomware. So that really important component there that has to be added on top of all of the other steps and measures that are in place. So when we're talking about the ransomware and anti-malware applications, is that you have to appreciate the importance of native OS scanning. That scanning each server, each operating system on its own individually is absolutely necessary. We talked about no operating system is immune from malware. Every operating system has a potential for being a host, whether it's impacted or not, whether it is able to execute on that platform, it can act as a host, and that is a vulnerability in the environment. So making sure that these systems are not hosting them, spreading them out to other PCs, and those are really our most vulnerable, where impact is seen, but having the ability to make sure that we're not sitting those threats out on our servers is critical. When you start looking at non-native scanning programs, you're going to unfortunately actually create more security issues, because now you are trying to take that data across the network down to that other platform and scan it over there. So now you're taking unencrypted data in the clear and exposing it, potentially, adding more access for the user that's being used to do the scanning. And so it actually creates more issues. If you've got a compromised network and you're pulling everything across the network in the clear from your server, your core server for the business, and you've now just given that attacker golden information. They can now see that data. Now they know exactly where they need to go attack. So native OS scanning is really the only option for ensuring that every server is not going to be impacted.
Yeah, security by obscurity is really not a great option anymore.
No.
People think nobody knows about this type of system, so no one's going to go after it. If there's money to be made, someone's going to try and make that money, and it's really not very hard. So many systems now, they've got Java on them, or they've got Python on them, or Perl, or at least a shell sh or bash type prompt. That's all we need. It's not like we have to have some magic technology to deploy malware and affect these systems. It's pretty common tools that we see across environments on all types of systems now.
Yeah, and I know, but when they're watching networks, they're analyzing traffic. They want to see where everybody's going, right? I mean, that's follow the trail to where the good stuff is. If everybody's connecting to a single server, guess what? That must be important. You can give away a lot.
Definitely.
Yeah, so every device in your organization needs to be addressed. And so every device needs to be monitored. You need to be able to see the devices, make sure they haven't been compromised, know what's connecting to the network, find those vulnerabilities everywhere they are. We talked about cell phones, laptops. You've got a lot of remote employees. They've got laptops that are connecting to the network. Security cameras, video conference units, MRI, CT machines, if you're in the health industry, the robotic automation in manufacturing, those are all connected as well. Point of sale systems. I work with a lot of retail, and their point of sale systems connect back to the home network. Smart coffee makers, refrigerator. My refrigerator can connect to the internet and display photos. So all of those things have to be considered. Every device is a potential vulnerability. You can't ignore those little things, the ones that you don't really think of. It's not just the servers, it's not just the PCs. We talked about educating those employees with those phishing simulations. So best way to train somebody is to give them examples and actually see if they will follow through with it. So you do your training, send out some test emails to see who's going to actually click through. They need additional training. Social engineering, pen testing. Look at your employees' social media. What about that? Who's giving away information? Who's on LinkedIn that's saying something that might actually expose something? Hey, I got a promotion. Hey, I'm working with this team. We're doing a big thing now. It's a secret project. Oh boy, that's good. So really just making sure everybody's aware of what's going on and testing their abilities, making sure that it's on the forefront of their minds, that you're going to have that vigilance, and it validates that the training's working. So circling back to it, these are the people that have the access. I've already talked about that, but really making sure that our users who we give access to are not going to be the conduit for these attacks.
I'll throw in a shameless plug here. If
Okay.
you aren't doing, and I just thought of it, I would probably put the link on the slide. It just occurred to me, on our coresecurity.com website, we do have a multi-part course on doing effective phishing simulations in your environment.
Nice.
It's in the free resources tab. Watch it at your leisure, but it's full of tips and tricks and examples of how to get this launched in your environment if you're not doing phishing simulations, to
Yeah.
make sure that your employees understand what it is that might be coming at them, and helping you to think about not just how to teach and train them, but just as importantly, what do you do if they fail? Because that's also part of the process. If somebody clicks on my test fish, do I send them to remedial training? Do we fund shame them? If it happens too many times, does it have an effect on their job and their role? All of those things have to be taken into account when you're doing fish training.
Yeah. Can you trust this person with this information and access to the systems if they can't pay attention? Yeah. No, Bob, I think that's a great resource. I love free resources. Anything helps. Everything helps. All right. Well, let's go talk about what organization. Oh, actually, look, we've got some more facts. 70% report user awareness and training are most effective to prevent and block the malware ransomware. So, the people that would answered this, they did believe that this training is effective. So, it's definitely worth the time and investment in getting that done.
I think so. Do it yourself. Use a service, whatever the case might be, but just do it.
Yep.
And do it repeatedly. Doesn't have to be every day, but it can't be once and then it's forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah, we forget. All right, so we'll talk about what organizations should be doing. We've already kind of thrown a lot of this information out, but I like to kind of just circle back and summarize it to make sure that you really caught all those things that we were talking about. First, applying those security updates to the VPN software. That's how your users are connecting. We need to make sure that those updates are there. Those are the vulnerabilities. That's where things are gonna happen. Monitoring for anomalies in your infrastructure, making sure you have visibility to your infrastructure to look for those weird things, because the one-off is not going to be necessarily the thing you're going to see the easiest. That's the needle in the haystack. So you need to make sure that you have tools that actually allow you to monitor for those blips, the little blip that you may not notice. So really important for that. Of course, going back to monitoring and teaching the employees watch for phishing emails, circling back, giving them those reminders, throwing those out repeatedly, whether it's quarterly, monthly. It doesn't have to be every day. Secure RDP and VPN with multi-factor authentication. So going back to something, Bob, that you had talked about earlier, the SolarWinds and Orion breach, that was discovered because an additional cell phone number was added for one of the employees' multi-factor authentication, and it was a red flag. So that was actually what helped them even discover that there was a problem. So multi-factor authentication is critical for making sure that the person connecting is really who they say they are. Credentials can be compromised very easily. We've already talked about that. So making sure that you've got an additional layer of authentication. Employing the least privilege with regards to access. Not giving everybody the keys to the kingdom. Do not give away everything, because everything will end up being compromised. Monitor your event log data. You may need to tune your SIM. So really use the information that's available. Don't just log stuff and then 6 months later go back and go, shoot, I wish I'd noticed that. We could have prevented this massive attack. you have to use the information that you have available to you to stay on top of it. Pen testing, we brought that up. Conduct pen testing to expose your weaknesses. You need to pen test for every platform, though. You can't just pen test and use one pen test approach for all servers. It's not a one size fits all. So you need to make sure that who's doing your pen testing understands the environment that you're testing so that they know what the vulnerabilities are in each of those areas. And of course, making sure you have antivirus. Every server, every system needs to have that scanning in place. You can't leave a single server exposed. They all need to be part of the equation and have that native scanning on each of those servers, the PCs. Every layer is going to help to prevent the spread of an attack. Something's going to get in. You just need to make sure that it's not going to get very far, minimizing the damage, minimizing the exposures. What do you think, Bob?
I think everything you have on there is super critical.
Yeah.
I'll put in a patching all your products with security updates.
Yeah.
Of course, I'll put in the double thing on the VPN software. I think a lot of times, VPN software has issues just like any other software program. Our pen testing platform teams actually recently worked with one of the major providers because of a 0-day that we found. We actually have exploits that we use on multiple vendors' VPN platforms to either get into the systems illicitly or elevate our credentials once we're into the systems as maybe a non-privileged user like Bob, and then I want to get to sysadmin. Those things exist. Those exploits are out there. They're being used in the wild, and they're part of what the pen testing platforms and pen testing teams do. So critically important, especially in today's many times we work from home, work remote world, to keep your VPN software up to date as those vendors release their security updates. I did have one other quick poll to launch here, so I'm going to do that. And I'll leave that up for a minute. Monitoring and watching that traffic, I think, is also super critical. And sometimes it's a process of tuning your environment to understand, like I said, what are the anomalies? What doesn't look quite right in my system? Because that's a rabbit hole maybe I need to go down and take a look at and being able to do that. Sometimes we'll see, people are using from other things, other surveys and other vendor things that we've done, sometimes 10, maybe 12 different solutions in their environment as a security team, and being able to correlate all of that data together and keep an eye on all of it. It is a huge job. There's only so many log rows a person can look at in a day. So being able to tune your tools, tune your SIM to be able to filter out the white noise is really critical, and being able to do that. I am going to close off this poll now here so that we can spend a few minutes answering questions that anybody might have that have come up. So thank you for your responses. Pretty spread across the board. Everybody, of course, has Windows, but Linux, AIX, IBMI all pop up there as well. I work a lot with the Linux AIX side. Sandi works a lot with the IBMI. I can tell you, at least from my email and my phone conversations, it's really busy these days.
Yeah. For sure. And a lot of these servers, you just don't think of it. And I imagine that some of the attendees here are going, oh, I forgot about that server, or wow, I didn't even think of that. And, it's about awareness, and you got to start somewhere. So now that you've got to think about those, hopefully that's where it'll come in. All right. So I guess attendees can push messages through the chat window. Is that where we're doing questions today?
They should have a questions option.
Okay, perfect.
That they can select, and I was just trying to blow it up because I see that we have some. So one question was about will you get a copy of the slides and the recording? Yes, if you registered for the webinar, you will get a link to the recording and a copy of the deck afterwards, so that you'll be able to review it or share it with your colleagues as you need to. We did have a question about cyber insurance and does it usually cover ransomware?
Hmm.
Um, I will not pretend to be an expert um, in that field. So I think definitely talk to a insurance professional on that. One thing that we have seen from people that have talked with us, and we've had some people that call us post breach to help them out sometimes too, like the four that we talked about, is that is generally going to increase your costs if you've suffered um, some kind of an attack. Because of course, just like if you crash your car, they're going to make you pay more next year to cover your car. If somebody has to pay out in your cyber insurance, they are probably going to increase your rates in the future to cover what they just paid out.
Yeah, another thing too, Bob, is if they will even pay out. One of the expectations, and you have to look very closely at the policies, is that they do require that you're doing everything you can to prevent the attacks. So you leave the keys to the car in the ignition. Your insurance company's not going to pay for your car getting stolen. You left it wide open, ready to go. So you do have, I have had that feedback that the cyber insurance, they do require that you are doing every layer to protect the environment. If you don't have a layer in place, they're going to say, well, you actually didn't do enough to prevent the attack, so we're not going to pay. So you have to be very
Mhm.
careful with that.
Yeah, here's a very interesting one around prevention and detection strategies, and it kind of boils down to what types of strategies are we doing to counterattack the attackers. So essentially, are people taking offensive roles against perceived malicious actors? And there definitely are some things happening around that. I think it's a little bit of a gray area for sure, because you don't want to break the law going after someone that you perceive might break the law against you. But there are things definitely happening. There's a lot of companies that collaborate on these things. I can tell you from some of our experiences in the areas that we're in, we have full-on threat research exploit writing teams here at Help Systems and Core Security. So our teams are interacting with dark web actors on a daily basis. We are chasing down companies' data to see if they've been compromised or to get it back for them. We are looking for the ways that people are going to try and exploit that initial access and trying to build defensive strategies around that, and doing a lot of information gathering, email side, interacting with these spam people that are sending the phishing emails and creating those big phishing groups, trying to steal those, the things that we learn about in those pieces. We are definitely, when needed, helping to share with law enforcement or other groups. I know there's a lot of other companies doing that as well. There are some very large collaborative groups between corporate world and law enforcement trying to get a handle on these. And you're starting to even hear now the U.S. government officials, talking about that. Do we start to take offensive actions? You might have seen some things recently where the FBI actually got in and
Hmm.
patched some people's Exchange servers. When you see a big takedown that happens around, just I think it was yesterday or the day before in the news, the FBI built a malicious
That app,
communications app and shared it out
yes.
to the criminal environment and used it to take them down.
I was
There's a
just thinking
lot of
about
those
that,
things
Bob.
happening, but
Yeah.
definitely we try and leave that to law enforcement because they have the permission to do it. If I turn my pen test team off against some perceived malicious actor, I'm probably breaking the law on my side, and we're going to get in just as much trouble.
Might be
But
some
there's
liability there.
definitely, and you're inviting them to come back after you as well. Everybody's a
Hmm.
target, and you just raised up your head to make it more of a target sometimes. We did have a question. Maybe this would be a good one for you, Sandy, especially around changes to backup systems, frequencies, and types to help keep their data from hopefully being compromised if there is an attack. So how do I help protect my backups from being compromised as well as my live systems?
Yeah, so with backups, you need all the layers that you're putting in place are also going to defend those backups. Backups should not be available online or readily available through any of the common methods, whether it's through um, tape connection, anything like that. if it's on the cloud, making sure that it is not connected to the network so that it is not also compromised in an attack.
Yeah, if I'm in a rotation strategy as a threat actor, I need to be persistent in the environment long enough that you've rotated every piece of media back through so that I can affect it. So having some of those long-term backups, you think of the archival offsite type things. Just like if my building gets hit by a tornado, I have to have a copy of this stuff somewhere else that I can pull back.
Yep.
So whether that's I know people that have done it by the head of IT takes a copy home once a week and puts it in his basement, and they rotate him through because it's cheap and effective. Others have multi-site strategy where I send data from data center 1 to data center 2 in the other direction. So that if I lose a data center, I've got some live systems and a copy of my backup available for the other one. And I'm doing those exercises where I know that I've used my backups occasionally. And in previous roles, being more operational, sometimes have seen that become a problem. Well, I've got backups because every night I write a backup tape, and there's this whole stack of them sitting right here, and never have any of them actually been applied. And when something finally happened and they stuck one in the drive, doesn't work. And then
Didn't work.
another one didn't work. And then
Testing
another one doesn't work because it's never
yeah.
been tested.
Disaster recovery testing is critical too. So, and actually that's a good point, is that with disaster recovery, the recovery is a little bit different than recovery from a ransomware attack. Things are not all created equal with that. So, you have to have a different type of plan for recovering from those types of attacks.
We also did have a question. Good thing I did some shameless plugs about can we share a link to that phishing simulation tutorial? I will make sure that we include that in the follow-up email that gives you a link to the recording. We'll also share a link to that free e-course on doing effective phishing simulations. And I think that is covering pretty much all of the questions. And we are kind of reaching the top of the hour here. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with us. If we did miss any questions in our live replies here, we will make sure to follow up with people on that. Other than that, I guess thank you from me. And thank you from Sandi for taking time out
Thank
with
you,
us.
guys.
We definitely hope that we can speak with you again in the future. We like to do these webinars and educational sessions all the time. We do have a ton of content on our help systems and core security resource tabs where you can view different webinars on different security subjects. Everything from these protecting sessions, working with AV, working with backups, all the way down to the think like an attacker type ones. We have a big series on how attackers actually work and getting deep into the weeds of this is how we will compromise your Active Directory, or this is how we will compromise your Linux box, and show you the steps to do it and how people do it and what the ramifications can be. So we hope that you will view a lot of our additional content as well. So thank you very much, and we are going to end our session for today.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bob. Great information.